Okay, so as we're talking about event.prevent default, we already have parent and child component. We did some communication yesterday. So let's talk about event.prevent default. Maybe in our parent component itself, I'm going to have another paragraph here. You could use any HTML tag here. Now let's say we have an anchor tag which has a hyperreference, maybe some link to a website. Again, I'm going to use mine. So what is basically the default behavior of an anchor tag? Anytime you click on any anchor tag, it's going to navigate somewhere, or maybe that's basically the default behavior for any anchor tag. It says that it is definitely going to navigate to a certain link that you have provided, certain URL that you have provided. And maybe I'm going to provide a target, so it will always open in a new window if I click here, and maybe I can just add the same name here. Okay. So let's go ahead and just the simple anchor tag that I have added. I will add one more anchor tag here, and this time I will say there is some concept called mail to colon, and I can have the email over here. So what actually happens, the default behavior of this mail to tag is within this anchor tag, it actually going to open the email for sending the email, and it will populate this email as the true address. Similarly, there is a for telephone, like phone number. If you really wanted to do a phone call, you can have, I think, TEL, and then you can have your phone number here. It's going to do the calling for you. Now we've got this. Okay, I'm going to update this text as well. Yeah. So the previous deployment is already done. We are going to take a look into that deployment only, and then we will make the changes later on. So as you know, right, we have already got this LWC application. We've got this link. If I click on this link, it is basically taking me to my web, and it will maybe take 10 or 15 seconds to load it over here. If the URL is correct, you can see here now my web is loaded here. Okay. Now, maybe if I wanted to say on click, I'm just clicking on this, and I'll say handle click. And we will define this method here in our, okay, there is already a handle click. Maybe I'll say handle URL click. This is a new method that we wanted to define here within JavaScript. We're not doing anything. We're not using event.prevent default over here. Okay. And what will happen now if we deploy this, it is definitely going to, we will basically see what exactly it's going to do. So yeah, now the deployment is done. Let's refresh this page. This time we will see both email and hyperlink. So I'm not clicking on this email because it will open an email in a different tab. So if I click here, it is still taking me to the web because we are not doing anything. Now, if we use event.prevent default, okay, this is a method within this event. This variable could be anything, as I said. It could be event EVT. Maybe if I say EVT, it's going to do that. You can even put your ABC. You can put your name. You can put anything that you want as a variable name. But it's going to have all the event object details, like any prevent default and other, like target, current target, all those things. Now, if we deploy, you will see here, nothing is happening. I'm clicking on it, nothing is happening. Okay. The reason is that because now I have prevented the default behavior of our anchor tag. So what it is saying is, it's saying that, okay, now I'm being prevented by default behavior. Now, whatever the logic that I'm going to put it over here, this logic will take in place. So if I wanted to maybe call an NFS class, or if I wanted to maybe do the API call with the help of fetch method, or maybe some other method, we can utilize those. We can do that logic. So as a best practice, we should always be using this prevent default behavior unless we really want that to happen. So maybe let's say that you have a URL to a record, that is a Salesforce URL itself, and on the click of that URL, you wanted to navigate to that certain record, that you have got. So you really don't need to specifically prevent that behavior because you really wanted to navigate there. And even you really don't need to have this method because that is the default behavior of your anchor tag. So similarly, when we are working with the events, there are going to be default behavior that we wanted to prevent or not prevent. So that's actually happens. So is this clear now, the concept of events that we have? Not event, actually the prevent default.
Amit, I have a question here. Like, always this event or prevent default is required. Like, like, what is exactly like why I'm doing? Suppose if I don't want this, okay, and I won't be putting any URL there. Okay? So will it be required in that case also?
If you really don't want, maybe if you have something, you don't have a URL here, right? Maybe you can have something like this, JavaScript colon word 0, or maybe you can have a hashtag. Maybe sometimes you see something like hashtag over here. If you have this kind of things, you really don't need to have. But as I said, it's a best practice to have that prevent default. So maybe at some point, if someone comes and changes the URL over here, maybe as a developer, you just made the changes over here, something, and then some other developer comes and he or she thinks that, okay, there has to be a URL, or maybe they are putting the URL, then it's going to break the things, right? So to be on the safer side and to always be on the like following the best practice, you should be using. But again, if you don't use, that's not going to make much impact until unless you know that you are not going to um, like you're not going to have a URL over here. There are going to be certain next, like when we will talk about LDS, Lightning Data Service, we will see how we can prevent, how we are preventing the default behavior and applying our custom behavior. So there also we are going to prevent that. So it's basically more like when you wanted to apply your own custom logic there for certain events, then you are going to prevent the default. If you don't have such thing, if you don't put, there is nothing, there is no such loss for you. So it's not like you should be doing.
Okay, thank
Yeah. So if not, then we can start with the events, and we will like we are not going to cover complete events here. I'm going to maybe take a slow here because event is really going to be important for us. So I'll try to cover in two parts. Some of the events combination we will cover today, and some of them we are going to cover on Monday. Okay. So what are the events? So events are basically used whenever we wanted to do the communication between the two components that are related with each other. So if the components are not related with each other, we cannot use the concept of events to do the communication between those two components. Now, like events, as we talked about, event are always going to be used whenever there is a hierarchy, like parent to child relationship, or parent and then it has child, it has grandchild, that kind of relationship. And the event will always get fired from a child component and will get handled from the parent component. So if you have multiple components, maybe let's say you've got A, then you've got B, and then you've got C, then you are going like your, maybe if your C is firing an event, your B can handle, or your C is firing an event, your A can handle. Similarly, your B can fire an event and A can handle. C cannot handle because C is a child element, child component for B. So as again, just to reiterate, parent-child relationship is always required for the events to communicate in, say, Lightning Web Component, and the event will always get fired from a child component in the hierarchy. Parent component will not be able to fire an event. So if there is a complex hierarchy, like there is a parent, a child, sorry, there is a parent, then it has like this. Maybe if there is a parent, right, then there is a child, then there is a grandchild. So now in this case, in this hierarchy, this grandchild will be able to fire the event. This can fire the event, okay. This can also fire the event because this is a child of this parent. This parent can also fire the event, but as this parent does not have any parent, so firing an event from this parent does not make any sense. Maybe in future, if you utilize this parent component within another parent, maybe let's say, then there is something comes into the picture, and then we again got a super parent, right? And then that super parent needs to have some information. Then this like this parent component can definitely fire an event. So it's like any component can fire an event, but it is always like recommended, or it always makes sense. uh, the child event is firing the event and parent is handling the event, because child is going to send some information, or maybe send some say that this particular event has happened here within my component, and now you need to handle it. Now you take care of this is the information. Maybe it can send the data, or maybe it could be a blank event. Okay, these are the two kind of events that could be: the event which is containing a data, okay, an event that's not containing a data. It just maybe identifier, or maybe we'll say, yeah, it's an identifier or a notification to a parent component that I'm done with my work, and now from here you take care, and it's up to you what you wanted to do. So we will see how frequently and how important this events comes into the picture. And then events are already like predefined, not in only Lightning Web Components. These are basically we will say the predefined inbuilt with the help of the DOM events. Like DOM are the document object modeling for any web language, for any web development language. DOM is going to be there. Even a simple HTML have a DOM. So these custom events, these events are already available for all the DOM elements that we talked about. So we have seen, like previously we have seen some browser events where we talked about on click, we talked about on chains, we have not looked into the other events, but there are like on chains, we have got on key up, on key down, on mouse over, on mouse enter. Like there are so many events that you have, and if you really wanted to know what are all the events, you can go to your HTML, and within any, maybe it could be any HTML tag, you just use on, and you will see that these are all the events that we can utilize. And these all are the standard browser events provided by the DOM elements that we have got. The APIs, all the encapsulation is there in those DOM elements. And for Lightning Web Components, if we wanted to have certain like some extra events on top of these events that we are looking here in the screen, you can see, right? On abort, on blur, on can play for videos and audio files, on chains, we are already talked about, on double click. If you're dragging and dropping, maybe you are developing a functionality for drag and drop. Maybe you have got on error, on focus. There are so many things. Key down, key press, key up, unload. Like we have got some mouse events are there, or then some video or audio events are there. So many events are there. And maybe if we wanted to develop our own events on top of these events that are available here, then in Lightning Web Component, we use an interface provided by JavaScript itself that is custom event. This is an interface. This is not a class. So this is a custom event that we use, custom event interface that we use in our JavaScript to create the event, the custom event, define our own custom event. Like in our Aura component, what we used to do is we used to create the event, right? The Aura event that we used to get, and then we have the attributes that child is registering and then firing the event, parent is handling that event. So here we have got this custom event by default provided by the web technology W3C. And this is a simple syntax. I'll walk you through when we will be creating. But if you see, we are using a new keyword for creating the instance of our custom event. And it takes basically few parameters, like minimum one parameter is required for creating an event, and that is going to be the name of your event. And if you wanted to pass some information to the parent component, like you say, okay, maybe there is a child component which you have added within your parent component. Okay, and then you have some input in your child component, and that child component is creating the account record in the system. So once you click on a save button, that account record is created in the system, and now you wanted to send that account ID to your parent component, and you say that this account has been created and this is the record ID. How you will send that information from child to parent is with the help of custom event. And if you really wanted to pass the information, you have to utilize the curly braces, the flower brackets. And detail is a property that is again within this custom event interface. Detail is another property that we use for sending the value from child component to parent component. You can either pass the object over here, you can pass arrays, you can pass anything. So basically this detail is nothing, it's a type of object, that super object that we used to get, right? In Salesforce also we have got that object class. In JavaScript or in Java as well, we have got this object class. So you can pass any type of information that you want. As a best practice, we should always passing the non-primitive data types that are, I think I'm really confused. We can only pass a string type, integer, double, or decimal, that kind of information we should pass. But there is no such restrictions that you cannot pass arrays or array of objects or object or some other information. Okay. And then there are two, like there are three basically Boolean attributes. One is bubbles, one is composed, and then there is one called cancelable. Okay. So bubbles and composed are really used for bypassing the shadow roots that we talked about in our previous session. So if we say that bubbles equal to, by default, these both are false. Okay. That's why we said that whenever, like by default, any custom event cannot cross the shadow DOM. So we have seen in the previous video, right? We had got this shadow DOM here. So if this to-do task is firing any event, this boundary cannot be crossed by the event by default. Now, if you really want to cross the boundary, then you have to use bubbles as true. You need to say bubbles is true. That means now the event can cross the shadow DOM, the shadow root that we have. Okay. And when we talk about if we say that composed at false, that means it can it can cross the shadow tree as well. It can go to the like grandparent level. We will see, like on the theory basis, if I keep telling you, you will not be able to understand it. So on the events part, just the introduction. Any questions so far? Anything confusion that comes in your mind? Anyone? Okay, I don't see. Yeah, we all are. Are we really listening, or everyone like we just joined and then we went to sleep? Just kidding. Yeah, I'm actually, yeah, I'm more like, if you are active in a call, that really helps me to deliver best.
Yeah, Amit, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, somebody's asking.
Okay. So bubble is for root and the other one is for till at the top, right? That's the only difference, right?
Yeah. The composed, that we say compose, right?
Okay.
So yeah, we'll see how it happens. Then we've got just a basic question. Why do we need a component within another component? Yeah, good question. Not a basic. This is really important question, I would say, Simar. So why would we need a component within another component? So there are so many things. Now let's say that you have some requirement for maybe very simple requirement, not much complex. You're displaying the list of accounts. Okay, maybe on the bottom you're displaying the list of accounts, and then on the top you're displaying the account, maybe a form that is creating the account records. Okay, that's very simple. Now what you're doing is, whenever you're creating an account record, that account record, after the account record is created, you're trying to display over here within maybe you'll say at the bottom of your component. So that's perfectly fine. You created everything in your single component. That's working really fine. Your client is really happy. Now there is another scenario. Now there is another requirement where someone comes and that person says, sorry, the same business comes and says that, okay, this is the one place where we need the list of account and you have to provide the information, like to create the account and then provide the account information. There is another place for certain other business requirement. They just wanted to see the list of accounts maybe in the table format, like the way you are already having at one place. So if you really don't have a like what you will do is ideally, not ideally, I would say what you will do is you will say, okay, forget about the other components. You will quickly go ahead and create a new component that is going to display the list of account in the table format with the exact same information that you are already having. So now if you really have if you really have created a component, says that maybe account list or maybe account table, where you are already displaying maybe the information like this, right? The same way we have got in list view. So here you are already displaying the information like this. So if you already have a different component, now come to our first requirement where there is a form, right? Account name or email, and on the click of that button, the account is getting created and the table is getting refreshed. So what you can do is you can now utilize that component, the separate component here within your parent component where you are trying to create the account record and then refresh this page. And when there is another requirement which comes to display the account with the same set of fields, you go ahead and put this component at that place with some modifications using some conditional rendering that we talked about, right? If and else. So that is basically just the simple use case. I've told you why we need a component within another component. And if I had to tell a fancy name for this, that is basically I would say it's basically uh, to increase the reusability and scalability of our solution and maintainability as well. So basically there are 4 or 5 fancy words that you might hear from your tech lead, from your architect, or even from many people that you meet, is like reusability, scalability, the operational efficiency, maintainability. So these kind of things, if you try to keep developing the reusable components, everything is going to be there. All these kind of things are going to be there. It is also going to have a simple solution. So is it like that? Does it making sense, Simar, or am I confusing you more?
No, no, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. Okay, how can we communicate from parent to child? What are the use case for that? Oh, I think, did you miss the yesterday session, Mohammed?
Yeah, I think yesterday I was not there. I watched, like I saw the recording, but I haven't completed.
Yeah, so
Yesterday,
basically, yeah, so
okay.
basically we have covered this question where we have seen how we can communicate from parent to child, how we can send the data, what's the use case. So everything we have communicated there. Sorry, we have covered there, but I'll let you know this. Basically, the code is basically for that example itself here. Whatever we are seeing in the UI, it's like this is a child component. Okay, this is a parent component. This button is on the parent component. This inputs on the child component. Okay, so what happens? Let's say the same example which I covered yesterday as well. Let's say that you're trying to create an account and this parent account is a required field, and this parent account is nothing. It is a child component within this whole parent component. Okay, this is your child component and assume that this is a required field. So if you click on save, by default, this is the standard behavior. So Salesforce let you know that this is a required field and you must need to complete it. Or maybe if you have some validation, that will say this is a required field, you must need to complete it. But in Lightning Web Component, what happens? You have to like apply the validation. If you don't apply the validation, even if you make the field as required, it will not make sense. It will never take that field as, it will never consider that field as required, and you have to like you will face some error, maybe null pointer exception, or maybe argument cannot be null. That kind of server side error you will receive if you don't do handle it at your client side like JavaScript. Okay, and then lookup is something in Lightning Web Component. There is no standard way that you can create a lookup field until and unless you are using the LDS, and most of the time LDS is going to fail. Okay, so now once you hit save, this is your required field, this is on your parent component. Maybe you have some validation, you did validation on the UI side and you said everything is perfect, but this particular field, this portion is on the child component. This is your child component where you created a lookup component that we will see how to create, so need not to worry. So Now this is also required field, but if you click on this save button on the parent, this child is not going to be checked, because that's not the something that you can check from parent. So there what happens, you basically have a method, a public method in your parent component, and that public method that you can create is with the help of @API. So on top of your child method, let me show you. On top of your child component method, you just need to put the decoration @API. It will make that method as public method. Okay. And then from your parent, you can call that public method, and you can maybe do the validation or some certain other logics. There could be some like multiple scenarios. I cannot recall other than this validation scenario. So that's why I'm just taking that as example. And then if this value is not null, then you will showcase the error. Now to come to the demo part, you will see here, this is a required field. If I click on cancel, I see these are the error message which is coming on. Now this cancel is sitting on my parent. This is the cancel button if you see the code, and this is my parent component. And from the parent component, this handle click, this is a way for calling the child component method. I would suggest please watch the complete recording of the previous session, and you will get the clear answer. And if you still have clear answer, feel free to ask. That's like something happy to take it.
Yeah, sure, Amit. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, any other question?
Amit Chandra, I have one probably basic question. Also,
Yep.
he talked about a custom event, right? That is always filing from child to parent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how about from parent to child? I mean, is it vice versa, or only the always the custom event from child to parent?
Yeah, so custom event is only for child to parent. This is very important thing that you need to remember, because in the interviewer or the interviewer in the interview, the interviewer might try to trap you here. Okay. So what you really have to do is you really have to, if you wanted to communicate from parent to child, that's what the question from Mohammed was there. Okay. And to communicate from parent to child, we really need to utilize the public methods that we have, like @API. We have to define the methods in our child component, and those methods should be decorated with @API. Okay. And those @API methods can be called from your parent component. Like there is a similar way, like we call the Apex class methods, like creating the object of our class, and then with the help of dot notation, we do call the methods, right? Then we do clearly call maybe I think as this is a quite common question, I can again showcase. So I'm going to, okay, this is a child component. Were you there in yesterday's session?
Yes, I was there.
Okay, so you should be having the idea on that front. But again, I think okay, I'll just take maybe the audience opinion. Do you want me to again cover this concept before we go ahead and deep dive into events? Yeah, just put into the chat window, maybe yes or no. Okay, I don't mind. Just one note. Sure. Okay. Okay, so I think that's fine to take it. Okay. So yeah, I'm just going to showcase a very simple way. Okay. In your child component, I'm going to create another API method. I'll say @API, and maybe we'll say handle. We'll say click me. This is a method. Okay. And maybe I'm going to, we can put a console.log here. Child method clicked. And this is as simple as we have to do in our child component, and then deploy it. Now in our parent component, the child component, we are already referencing this child component here. Okay. Within our within our parent component, we have a division tag, and within division tag, we have a child component that we are calling. And this button, instead of putting it within the child component, now I'm just going to put it here I'll comment out this event.prevent default. Yeah, the label I'm going to, sorry, variant, I'll change it to brand, and label I'll say called child method. Handle click is going to be same, and everything else, whatever the value we are passing from parent to child with the help of slots, that is also going to be same. Now this handle click, as we are using on click of this button, handle click is a method which we really wanted to take it here. Now we have got this handle click. Okay, this is a method. We are using a arrow methods concept. Okay. Now what we have to do is, first thing, whatever the default behavior of our button is, definitely calling a method. I'm going to prevent it, and then I'm going to write my custom logic here. So to everyone, again, to reiterate, let's say that you have a class called account trigger handler. Okay, I'm going to just write the syntax over here. Public class account trigger handler. Okay, and be ready for, there is a question coming to yourself, to your side. Then I've got a public void and maybe handle before insert. Okay, so now if you have to call this like this method of our class, what you will do? Can you put a syntax in the chat window? If you have to call this method of this class called handler account trigger handler, how you're going to do that? Can you create a new component because the existing component code? Okay, sure. I'm going to create, but the question remains same. You have to answer it. So you've got the syntax. I'm putting the syntax in the chat window, and you have to answer it. I'm going to create, as there is a. Okay, so let's create a new component, and we will say child1. Okay, and within this component, we will maybe have a simple division tag, and we will say child component. Yeah, Rohit, in the meantime, you can check who is giving the right answer, who is giving wrong answer. And then within your child, as we said, we are going to create a API method, and we will say handle click, just the simple method. As we said, right, whenever we wanted to call the method of our child component from our parent component, we need to make that method as the rate API decorated, and we just made it, and we will deploy it. Okay, so we've got it. We deployed this. Now let's quickly create another component. As we said, it is going to be parent1. Okay, now the very first thing that we will do is, within our parent component, we will have a LWC card. Title, I will change it to, we'll say parent to child, and instead of standard, I will use custom custom 65 or something. Okay, footer is going to be there. Let the card footer be there. I'll say parent to child, and division is, this is my body where I want to put the body. Let's remove this button. We really don't need right now. Yeah, let's have a button here. Before we have a button, let's have a paragraph where we will say parent component, then another paragraph where we will have a button, say LWC colon button. This is again this part that I'm using LWC colon. This is the coming from the extension called LWC sort keys. We have also talked about in previous videos. So we have to select LWC button. The variant, I will select brand. Label name, I will say call child method, and title is again, the method is handle click, which is like coming by default. So we have to define that method in our parent component here. So let's quickly define this handle click method. Okay, I'm not doing the prevent default this time. Before I start making the changes in parent component, in our child component, we forgot to put the console.log. So we just have a very simple console log, which is saying child method, child component method. Now we really need to use this child component within our parent component HTML file. So let's have another division tag, paragraph tag, and how we are going to use this? Again, we have to use the namespace, which is C hyphen, and then we have to put our component name, that is child1. Okay, that's it. We're not accepting any parameter in the child component, so we really don't need to do anything. Now let's copy this portion, whatever the syntax of calling the child method is, just do copy here. Now in your parent component, okay, in your parent one within the method, I see most of the you has already given, okay, the answers here, and most of you given the correct answer. So what we usually do is we usually create the object of our class. So the same thing, we have to find the element, okay. You can say find the child element. And how you will find it? With the help of the keyword called this, that represents this parent component, which is parent1, this dot. There is a keyword called template because we are working with the concept of templates. So as soon you say this dot templates, it's going to come up over here. This is our parent component or parent tag template. And then you have to use dot and say query selector. So this query selector is going to ask which element you wanted me to select. So within single quotes or double quotes, you just need to put the complete syntax of your component. So that is C-child1, only this portion, okay, this portion. And then now with the help of the conditional statement, that is if, before we go there, let's store this in a variable and maybe we'll say child component. So whatever the outcome of this this particular template, like this dot template dot query selector is going to come, is going to be this HTML syntax you will get as a outcome with all the variables, with all the methods, okay. And variables and methods are only going to be accessible that are public. Let's check if there is something in this component. That means there is something in this component. That what we will do is, now we will say call the method. So the same way you called the method of your Apex class, so you have to say child component dot the method name, that is handle click, and that's it. Just deploy it. So once you deploy it, your code is ready. Now after deploying it, we definitely have to make changes into our Aura application, because now here we have to use our component, which is parent1 instead of the parent, which was previous one. And let's refresh it. Now you can see parent to child. This is a custom icon. I don't know what it was. Okay. Now if I click on this child component method, the method will call within the parent component. Now if I do the inspect by right clicking, select the console, you clearly see that there is a console which says that child component method. Maybe we can clear it just to make sure it is correct. If you click here, you'll clearly see the count is getting increased. The number of times I am clicking on this method, the count is getting increased. So that is how you do call the parent component, like the child component method from your parent component. Any doubt so far? Or is it clear now how we call the how we do the communicate from parent to child?
Yeah, thanks, Amit, I think.
Okay. Now let's talk about the event best practices. Okay. So we have got while you are creating the event, the custom event, basically you should not be using any uppercase letters, because if you use the uppercase letters, you will start getting into the troubles. Okay. There should be no space within. If you have a big word, maybe you say success account or account success, there need not to be any space. There should be no underscores to separate the words. You should not be using the underscore to separate the word, maybe account underscore success or account hyphen success. That should not be the case. Okay. And the very important one is you should not be prefix your event name with the string on. The reason you should not be you should not be using prefix, because this prefix is always going to be there even you don't put a prefix, like if you don't put the on as a prefix on the name of your event. So it is always going to be there in your event, how we will see. Okay. And then as we talked about, right, we can, if you pass an object in the event detail, then any handler can change it without notifying the child component, which is bad. This is really bad. This is a note. This is a warning. Okay. In the yellow sign, in the yellow color. Now what it is basically, if you are passing an object from child to parent, okay, then your parent can easily change the value of your child component, and your child component even will not be able to understand that from where the value was changed. It will not be able to identify. The child component will not get notified from where the value has been changed. So that's really bad. So that's why we try to avoid passing the object in terms of like whenever we are talking with events. Like if you wanted to pass the information, we usually pass the information in terms of variables, multiple variables. We usually don't pass the complete object. Now this is again a very simple image. We have got a complete parent component. The top one is the parent component. This child component is the component within parent component. Your child component is going to fire an event, and your parent component is going to handle the event. Let's talk about event propagation. This is a really important, very confusing topic in the events, especially when it comes to events. It's really confusing for everyone. Okay. So there are two phases of any event: bubbles and capture. Okay. What means bubble? What does bubble means is, like, if you let me take you, maybe we all use waters, right? Maybe we all have been maybe someday we all have been in a water park, or maybe in a beach. Okay. So what actually happens is, there is a bubble which comes from bottom to top in a water, right? The bubbles you can see that comes from bottom to top. So when we say that bubble, like the event is bubbling, that means the event is going to bubble up from bottom to top. That's what it says. This red sign you see here, the event is bubbling up. The legend says that event is bubbling. So the component H is firing an event, and these are the siblings. These cannot handle the event. So component E is the parent. So component E is handling, then component B is handling, then component A is handling with the help of this bubble concept. Okay, that's why we have got that bubble as true. Then if we talk about capture, capture is we do capture, right? We capture from top to top to bottom. That is capture. Now let me give you a very real-time example. Maybe we all have faced in our career. So bubbling is right. Whenever you do some good work, every appreciation is going to be taken by your manager or your tech lead or your architects. That's the bubble up. You do the good work, your manager and your tech lead is going to take the appreciation, take the credit. And now let's do the vice versa. You blunder something, you do something which is not good, the functionality is not working, everyone is going to catch you. Like, because of you, it's not working. So that is capture. So capture is like whenever is coming from top to bottom. Bubble is that is going from bottom to top. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So as we're talking about event propagation, there has been as we talked about, right, there are three variables in terms of event. By default, the event cannot cross the shadow DOM. It cannot cross the shadow boundary. So we have the propagation. So we have got three variables: bubbles, composed, and cancelable. Cancelable is that its name indicates if you really wanted to cancel your event, you can use the cancelable as true. That means any component which is handling the event can cancel it. And if the event is canceled, no other components in the hierarchy are able to listen that event. Composed is basically whenever we wanted to bypass the event from the shadow boundary. Okay, so first thing, like by default, the event cannot propagate it through the DOM. They cannot cross the DOM. Okay, I think previously I might have told the incorrect way. Okay, now this is the correct way. By default, the event cannot be cross the DOM, its own DOM. Like we are in a child component, that child component is firing the event like this. We are within child component, and this child component is firing the event. That event cannot cross this boundary. You see here, this is the boundary that cannot be crossed by that event by default. But if we say that the event is set to bubble, okay, if the event is set to bubbles as true, by default it is false, but if we set as true, the event would be able to cross this boundary, and here it can be captured within any element inside your parent component, but it cannot cross this boundary now. Okay, but if you wanted to cross this boundary, then you have to set bubbles and composed both as true. That means what you're saying is, you're saying that with the help of bubbles, it's going to cross this boundary, and the event is here traveling somewhere. Your component can handle it. Now, if you want to cross this boundary, you have to set the composed as true, and that event can travel over here. That maybe you can consider this white background as the grandparent, and that can also handle your event. It is rarely seen that you have to use composed as a false. Very rare case. You have to use composed as a true. Very rare case, because Salesforce even does not recommends to use composed as a false due to some security reasons. There could be some data leaking. Okay, some data theft there could happen. So that's why Salesforce really don't recommend to use that. If you have a requirement for sending the event somewhere here, that is grandparent, then what Salesforce recommends is your child component fires the event, use the bubbles as true so that your parent component can handle over here in its own HTML components. And this parent component is now again going to fire a new event that will get handled by this grandparent. That is what the ideal way is, and that is what Salesforce also recommends. So we will also see the same way. The composed one, we will keep it for the later on. Maybe if we have time permits, we would be able to cover that as well. So that's about event propagation, bubbles, composed, and cancelable. Any questions so far?
Amit, would you mind to repeat that what was recommended?
Sorry.
The reason, I mean, you have mentioned something that Salesforce recommended. Can you please repeat that?
Yeah, so basically it's a security reason. There could be a data theft, there could be data breach, or there could be data leaking. So the reason, because of that, Salesforce really does not recommend that you should set the composed as true in any event. Very rare case you really need to have this composed, and that use case is also we are going to cover. We have that use case when we are going to cover that. So again, just to reiterate, let's say that there is another component called grandparent. Okay, now your child component is firing an event. You want your event to cross this boundary, and you let your parent to handle it here in their own HTML elements. You will use bubbles as true. Okay, now let's say that you also have a grandparent. Okay, that grandparent is the grandparent also need whatever the information the child is sending, that information is needed by your grandparent. So in that case, what you need to do is, instead of setting this composed as a true and let the grandparent handle the event, you should be your event will be handled by this parent component. This parent component is again going to fire another event, maybe with the same name, and this event will get handled by your your grandparent component. And that way we are keeping the we are making sure that the event hierarchy, the event that we are trying to communicate is between this parent component and this grandparent component. There is one more reason. When you expose this event, all the public property of your child component are accessible by your parent component as well. So that is again a very big security concern when we are using composed as a false, because now your grandparent can access anything for your grandchild which are even not required. So that's the reason because we should be firing another event over here. Is it clear now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, anyone else has any question? Nikhil, is it clear? Can you please repeat the capture part in the event propagation? Okay. So the capture is like whenever, let me again tell you here. Yeah, so it's like whenever you wanted to do the maybe capture is like, as we talked about, right? In your team, let's say that you're working in a team as a part of team, you have a hierarchy, like you have you are working, then you have your team lead, you have your manager, you have your senior manager, right? If you're doing a good work and there is a functionality which you delivered, maybe you worked with your colleagues and then you all has worked together, you delivered the functionality, and then when it comes to appreciation, rewards and recognition, it's all about their team leads and managers. Okay, senior managers, they say that my team has done this. Okay, they take all the good wishes and everything they take. Okay, but when it comes to the other way, you are working maybe the same team you're working now, there is a functionality that you have developed with the help of your team members, and that functionality is somehow not working. Maybe it failed in the production. Okay, now what will happen, the customer is going to like they will definitely not reach out to you because you're not the facing person. The customer will reach out to you, their senior manager will say, okay, we'll go to manager will go to team lead, and at the end it's you who is responsible. They will say that it's you because of that functionality is not working. So when there is a good work, okay, that good work flows from bottom to top, and the top person is going to take all the credits, that is bubbles. When there is a bad work, the complete heat is going to travel from top to bottom, and then you are going to take everything. That is capture. Capture means like you're capturing something. Maybe imagine you're capturing something. Maybe you're capturing a person. You're maybe if you have a younger brother or sister, you're capturing him or her. Maybe you're trying to capture your dog or cat. Just imagine that, and you will get to know what the capture exactly is. Is it clear? This is good when something gone wrong comes down. Yeah. Okay, so cancelable is equivalent to event dot stop propagation, or we can use stop propagation only when it is cancelable. So yeah, I think it's first of all, I really didn't try it, cancelable one in my Lightning Web component. We never get a chance to use cancelable, but stop propagation is basically to use propagating the event. So let's say your event is here in the parent component, and now you really don't want any other component to handle that event or listen that event. You can do the stop. You can use event dot stop propagation. That's going to stop the propagation. It will not let your grandparent to handle that event, and the event will get stopped. I'm not sure what actually does cancellation does. We haven't. I never used this. Maybe I'll do some research, see where the cancelable can be used, some use case, and then we'll let you know maybe on Monday or maybe coming days. So is it more clear, or any other questions in the propagation side? Okay, propagation or maybe capture or bubble, or in terms of event best practices, anything else?
One question.
Yes.
So said that post generally they should not use as a best practice. Uh, but just in case if we really need it, so you gave an example where we need the government to handle the event which is being fired. But if there, mm, I mean, the event which is being hired, and which is not at all linked with either the child or the parent. Yeah,
Okay.
we do that using the propagation event, right? So, how do we in that WC?
Yeah, so first of all, your voice was really breaking, but let me repeat what you said, and then you can confirm it is like my understanding is correct or not. So you're saying that there could be a scenario where we are firing an event and that event is not being handled by parent or grandparent. Is that true, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, if you are firing an event and your event is not being handled anywhere, you really need to think, is it like, am I doing it right? Like, do I really need to fire an event? Because that's that's something we really had to like question ourselves. Like, I'm firing an event. Why I'm firing this event? Does it really need it for me? That's the one
No,
thing.
I mean, it is the event which I'm firing. It is being handled by one of the components which is not linked with it is not there in the hierarchy of my current component.
That will
So
not work.
let's say,
Yeah, I hear you. What you're saying is, you're saying that, okay, there are maybe component A, B, and C. Okay, A and B are related, but C is a completely separate component, right? And then you're saying your B is firing, or maybe your C is firing an event, and that is being handled by B, and both are not related with each other, right?
yeah.
So the event will never get handled, because if you really wanted to use the concept of event, especially the custom events, your component must need to be in the hierarchy.
Okay.
Yeah. So if your component are, maybe there could be a use case where you say, like, I'm developing a reusable component like lookup component or picklist component, that okay, whenever the component is getting changed, I'm going to fire an event. And that's definitely a, like, at first point when you will be developing, it is going to be an independent event, not event, independent component, which is basically firing some event and then it's sending it to the parent component. But you will never wanted to fire an event from a component that is not related with anyone, because that event is going to lost, it's going to lost, and it will try to, maybe it will go there to all the components, say, do you want to handle me? Like, so that's really not going to happen and not going to work.
That's
Okay, yeah, thank you.
commendable. Okay.
Yep. Anyone else? Yeah, today I really like this, right, Rohit? We really got good engaging session.
Yep.
Okay, so if not, let me quickly cover this part at least. There are multiple combination of our bubbles and composed, okay? So the very first combination is bubbles is false and composed is false. That is by default, okay? This is the default configuration. So whenever the event is fired, it can be like handled only at a event listener defined at the component. So we will see how. And then there are some other combinations. So we will cover this combination, which is bubbles as false and composed as false. So this is again, we've got child one, okay, and we've got now what we will do is, within this child one component, first thing that I will do is, I'll really need a class which I'll say SLDS margin around underscore large. This is my class, okay. For the division, I'll have another division, and in this division we will have a button tag. Now on the click of this button, we are really going to fire an event. So we will say fire event. So we've got a button which says variant is success. You will see in a green color. Label is fire event. Title is also fire event. On the click, we have handle click. We already have this handle click, okay? So we really don't need to define. Now on this handle click, what really we wanted to do is, we wanted to maybe notify the parent user that, okay, this button has been clicked on me. And then this is the information, do whatever you want. So how you will do is, we will create an event, and maybe we'll say click event, okay. And we are going to say equal sign assignment operator. We will use new keyword, and we'll say custom event. As we talked about, that is our interface. And this event takes of that is the minimum parameter that is required, which is the name of event, and you can say maybe click, okay. So you have just defined the event and stored into a variable called click event. Now you need to dispatch this event. So how you will dispatch? You will use the keyword called this dot. There is a method called dispatch event. And this method takes the event that you wanted to dispatch. And this is your event. So the very simple event is this. You just create an event, okay? Provide the name and dispatch it. Maybe you can also, maybe you also see somewhere the code is written like this, which says this one, like everything in a single line. Some places, maybe your advanced developers or the experts in LWC or in JavaScript may be writing this kind of code, okay, in a single line. But I usually prefer write in multi-line just to make it clear, make it simple and readable, okay. So we've got this and the event is really fired. And if I deploy it, my event is getting fired, okay. And let's go ahead and come back to our Aura component. We have not handled that event, right, from our child component, but we are firing that event. So every time you click on this fire event, your event is getting fired, but it's not doing anything. It's not being handled anywhere. It's not doing anything. Now, if you really wanted to handle this event, how we will handle is, now copy this event, okay. The name of event, copy it, go to your parent component. As we said that by default, the combination, by default, the bubbles is set to false and composed is also set to false by default. We really don't need to define these. So this event, this is the child event, right? This particular child component is firing the event. So this event can only be handled in the child component itself, in the boundary of your child component. It cannot go here on top of this paragraph. So you really have to use the keyword called on, the name of your event that you said click, put a equal sign, use opening and closing curly braces, and give the name of your method that you wanted to execute on the click of this event. Now this on click is not actually the click that is defined by browser. This is the custom event that we have created. And you have to define this method within the parent component. Because this particular tag is there in the parent component, so this method is going to be defined in the parent component. And you can have an alert over here and you can say event handled and do save. Okay, and then now if we come back here and refresh this page, if you click on fire event, you will see event is handled. You again click on fire event, you got event is handled. Now you're getting twice. Why? So basically we're getting this event handled twice. The reason is that because it's this particular component is within a paragraph, and that's why this division. So when we click on this division, it's getting clicked, right? So that's why it is happening. So that's the one thing. Okay, now let's say that you wanted to pass some variable, some value from parent component, sorry, from child to parent. So what you have to do is, now after the name of your event, just put a comma and use opening and closing curly braces and hit enter. Okay, now you have to pass the value. So how you will pass the value? You have to use detail. Detail is a property within your custom event interface, and colon. Now you can pass the value like this. You can say value from child, okay, or maybe let me show you first like this, event.detail, which says that value from child. Now we have deployed this. Now we want this value in our parent component, whatever the value that we've got. So now we will say let create a variable called value. How you will access? Now if you really want to access the value that is being sent from your child component, you need to pass a parameter, and you can name it as event, which is really a common name because we wanted to handle an event. So what we will do is we'll say event.detail. Now this is my parent component, right? Detail. Sorry, this is my variable that I'm sending the value to. And maybe we'll say console.log and value. Again, I'll just let you explain how it actually works. Again, with the example of Apex, because we all are very good. I'm assuming that we all are good at Apex. So let's say that we have got a class, public class, maybe account wrapper. And within this class, we've got a public string account name. Okay. So if you have to access this variable, how you will access it? You will first create, okay, create the object of your class, and you will say obj.account name. That's how you're going to access, right? Now, similarly, this event is nothing. This is the object. Event is nothing. It is an object. Okay. This detail is nothing. It is a property. So if you really wanted to access the property of an object, you need to say event.detail, that dot notation. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, now we have fired this, like we have refreshed this after the deployment. And if you really come back and then we'll say fire event, okay. Value from child one. Okay, yeah, sorry. That's what we are sending actually. Value from child is what we are sending. Okay, so you clearly see value from child we are sending, and what are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I really don't know what exactly it is, but this is what we are taking. We are getting from our child component. Now this is the one way basically that you can pass the value. The other way is like you can pass the value in the form of object itself. So you can say this is an object, and here you can have multiple things. Maybe you can say account name, maybe salesforce.com. You can have account ID, could be any ID. Okay, and you can pass even, maybe you can say contacts. You can pass that as an array over here, and you can say name. This is one contact, and you can pass name as Rohit. Another contact, maybe Pankaj, another contact. So basically you can pass hell number of information that you really want, but as I said, passing this kind of information is really not recommended by Salesforce. But if you really have a requirement, you can always pass the values. That's really fine. That's perfectly fine. You really don't need to uh, think too much on that front. Now you have got this, right? Now you've got this detail is again an object here. You clearly see, right? This is again an object. So just to see whatever the value is coming, maybe you can, maybe now you can rename it as detail. And I'm just going to use JSON class method JSON.stringify and put it detail. So it's going to print everything in the form of a string in my browser. And in our browser, we will be able to see whatever is coming. Now, if you refresh this page, okay, we are going to clear it and click on fire event. So you can see here, right? It's basically sending like printing everything: account name, account ID, contacts, the number of contacts that we have got. Now, if you really wanted to access these, now how you will access is again the same way, dot notation, because detail is another object. So you have to say detail.account name. And similarly, you can say detail.account ID. And similarly for contacts, because contacts is the array, so you might want it to store it in a variable and then do the for loop and print it, or maybe utilize in your front end of your UI. So that's basically the first combination of our event propagation, that is like composed false and bubble false. Any questions so far? Okay, if not, this is the assignment. This list maybe this link maybe I can put it over here in the chat window. So what you have to do is, this is basically the this link does nothing. It has a JSON file. Basically it's a object, and then under the object you have got so many records for contact, including the picture and all those things. Okay, so what you really have to do is you really need to take out the JSON in your component. You need to put that as part of a variable, and maybe just do the, I'll say, yeah, just use a for each loop, and then iterate it, display the all contacts, and only you need to display name and title of your contact. Okay, you need to display name and title of your contact. And then what you to do is create a Lightning Web component to display the contact records from the above JSON file. So what exactly you have to do is, you need to create two components. One component which is going to display the account name and title based on whatever it is there. Another component which is going to display the rest information, like maybe ID, first name, last name, title, email, phone, and the picture in the image tag. Okay, then utilize your component, this component within this component. That's what you have to do so far as part of this assignment. Any questions?